So life in general usually ebbs and flows with chaos and order and chaos and order, or like the praise song we just listened to, those times when our world becomes very stormy and chaotic. And that is the very essence of our Shabbat teaching today. Everything Satan does to create chaos, Yahweh restores redemptive order to. You know, Satan thinks he can control things and make our worlds miserable, but it's Yahweh that is always in control of our world and what happens to us. And I never saw that more clearly until this past month or so, because I came across some new websites that were just made by ordinary people that Yahweh had blessed with some amazing insights. And we're going to get into that today when we get to the PowerPoint teaching. And these individuals bring to the surface that his word is so much deeper than we could ever imagine through various computations and the picture that numbers paint for us. And I pray that Yahweh continues to lead and guide us through those chaotic times in our lives. I know people have experienced death of family members. I know people have experienced being cheated and taken advantage of financially. I've heard those scenarios. I know that several of you have been in the midst of changing locations and moving, and that always disrupts our lives. And so there's struggles that we go through, and Satan loves to create chaos in our lives, but we can rest in Yahweh. Today, I wanted to start with a simple story about this dog that I showed you pictures of that came into our life last Sunday. This dog was in chaos, starving, full of fear. When I tried to first walk over to her in two adjacent empty lots, she started barking and running the other direction to keep about 200 to 300 feet between us. I left some treats because I knew she wasn't just going to come to me, and I walked back home. I just figured, well, I can't help her. She reappeared across the cove the next day, so I whistled and poured dog food in a metal bowl so she could hear that sound. If she had ever had an owner, she probably knew that sound of being fed. That worked. She came to my side of the cove, and I could stand just a few feet away because she was still skittish, but she was still very hungry. She really didn't pay any attention to me after she started eating. The next day, I had her eat in my yard, and I shut the gate. And even with a big yard, she panicked, apparently due to possibly past treatments of feeling closed in or caged in. She escaped through my neighbor's side of the fence with the larger spacing between the bars. And I was not expecting that to happen, because thankfully our neighbor was not at home. Neither was their Belgian Malinois, I may be saying that incorrect, a Belgian Malinois, or their little Pomeranian, because I had no idea if they were home, how now this dog was in their yard. But thankfully, I handed my phone to Carol Ann, and I said, call Jessica and make sure that they don't let their dogs out until I can get this dog out of their yard. And So she did. So in the meantime, I'm also on the phone calling our HOA for the subdivision and told him what had happened. And he said, try to get her in his yard around the pool, but he wasn't at home. So I took a cup of food and I had this starving dog a few steps behind me wanting that food and would bark periodically. And I honestly didn't know the temperament of this dog. So it's kind of creepy to have a dog following you and barking at your heels. So I had to walk 7 lots down along the water to reach Mr. Jim's. He lives in a big house and the backyard was multi-level with curved pathways interspaced with steps and alcoves, and they weaved their way up to the second level where the pool was that had a broken gate. So he had told me once I got her in that area, I could secure the gate with bricks nearby. Well, I did get the dog in there, but could not get to the gate. I could not get the gate shut before she bolted. And so I was back to square one. By now, I'm in this sweater. Matter of fact, it's a sweater I'm wearing today. And it was getting closer to noon and it was getting very hot and irritating. And I get a phone call from Jessica that Carol Ann had called. And it was kind of unusual because she sounded a little put off. And I was still trying to catch the dog and explain to her, not knowing what message Carol Ann had left exactly, but I was trying to get off the phone so I could get the dog. Then Mr. Jim's subdivision workmen over the HOA show up at his house and they see me, a stranger, by Mr. Jim's pool. And I hollered to the guy that was driving up and I said, look, I spoke to Mr. Jim. I'm just trying to catch this stray dog. So now I'm out of dog food. So I called Carol Ann to bring me another cup of dog food. And while I'm doing that, the maid at the next neighbor's house comes out and I figured I better explain to her why I'm there. And so eventually Carol came with the food and I had her hide behind some trees. So if I got the dog by the covered pool, then she could shut the gate. And the workers needed the tractor, but I asked them to wait until I could see about getting the dog. So up and down those slippery steps and slopes, I went up and down to no avail. I mean, I really tried to get her back, but she was spooked. Then I tried to get her to come in another entrance to no avail. Then I gave up and walked back to our house with her a few feet behind me, once again, barking at me as I'm walking back to the house. So in addition, because we were behind all these houses, they also had dogs that were barking at us along the way. It was interesting. So I felt the only option the next day, sadly, would be to get trappers. I had called a couple of different trappers and both of them said they can't trap domesticated animals. And then I even called the Humane Society and they said, well, they all go through the city animal services first. And so I was at a loss of what we could do and how we could help this dog other than feeding a stray dog surrounded by a subdivision of kids playing and not knowing any history of the dog. So I called the city's animal services and they said that they could provide a humane trap to catch her, but only in good weather and not on weekends. Well, our weather hasn't been so sporty here lately as we've had a lot of rain and they wouldn't set a trap in the rain. And they did say after they caught her, they would put me on a call list after 4 days before any mention of euthanasia. And they would, post her picture to see if there was an owner that would claim her. And I'm sure you're seeing by now the chaos that this little dog was in and the chaos that it brought into our home that one day you have order and the next day you have chaos. And at the time, I saw no other options. So I told them to call if and when they could come, but I knew it was going to be raining for a while. So I knew it wouldn't be anytime soon. In the meantime, I sent Jessica a text further explaining and apologized for the confusion, because she told me she was out of town. She was in the middle of teaching a class, and you know, I felt badly that I couldn't hardly take the time to explain to her the details, but she said, no worries. Then as she was traveling home on Wednesday, she called so I could update her on all that had happened. And she said that she would be glad to help in any way. She confirmed her dogs were with her son in Mississippi while they were out of town. So all of that worked out well. And, you know, I was praying every night for Yahweh to guide me to do the right thing. I was feeling very uncomfortable about using a trap, even though it doesn't hurt the dog. I knew it would freak this dog out even more so than she had already experienced. And I knew that would cause her more trauma. And then I had this other voice going on in my head about, don't enter the controversy of contracts. And if you all know about these animal services, or when you adopt a pet, you have to sign for stuff. You have to adopt them, and you enter somewhat of a contract. And of course, Matthew's been hitting on that particularly strong these days. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to enter into that kind of contract. And so I had that in my mind too, but at the same time, I had this loose dog, and you know, it was almost like Yahweh said, tag, you're it. So Jessica, my neighbor, agreed that it would traumatize the dog, and I think we all agreed on that. So I told her the dog was getting used to me feeding her, and I could get her in my yard, but told her she might escape into her yard. She said no worries, but she would not be able to sleep if she knew that dog was out in the freezing rain. So I got the dog back in my yard. I tried to pet her, but she did a mouth movement as a warning, like, you know, maybe it was a little too soon. So all I had were beach towels for her to lay on our back patio. And we had to bring in, of course, we had to bring in all our lawn cushions and pillows and stuff. Because while she was still on the outside of our yard, I tried to put a tarp down, and she had kind of tore that up, and she had been pulling on the neighbor's rope where his boat was tied up and trying to jump in his boat. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to make this a setup so she'll have success and not failure. So I knew she could potentially be destructive. We got her settled on the beach towels. So there was just still uncertainty about, okay, now I have this stray dog on my back patio. I still have to figure out how to deal with her. And so all we could do was take one day at a time. So she laid on the towels and slept there overnight. So we were making progress. So yesterday, well, the day before yesterday, me and Carol Ann went and bought a 42-inch by 30 wire kennel with a pad and circular bed. And I already knew she liked toys because I had used toys from my other dogs to kind of get her used to me. So we got things set up so she would get used to things before the next freeze that night. Then I got a call from Jessica asking questions that I had already told her. And I said, Jessica, I said, didn't I already talk with you today about all of this? She said, no. Then I realized when I handed Carol Ann my phone to call Jessica, I had like 3 Jessicas in my phone. She called the wrong Jessica by mistake. But what added more chaos and confusion to all of this chaotic situation was that she too, this other Jessica also was out of town, and she too had 2 dogs, and she also had a neighbor that works with stray dogs. And she had been in the middle of teaching a class out of town when she got the phone message and had called me while I was trying to catch the dog for explanation. So anyway, back to the dog. I gave her the name Tess, Tess, and I gave the dog her new bedding and her setup, and she took quite nicely to it. So me and the other Jessica had a pretty good laugh about getting the 2 Jessicas confused, and what an amazingly confusing scenario that was. And the other Jessica was trying to figure out, well, I really didn't understand why you were apologizing to me. So anyway, we keep on trying to take care of the dog in the midst of all of this stuff. And so, hallelujah, after I took the bigger bed, you know, I got her settled in the kennel. She didn't like the bigger bed in her kennel at first. I put that on the side. She actually went in and laid on the pad. So we were making progress, because if push comes to shove, we may have to pick up the whole cage to get her to the vet like that. She's not leash trained. So she was exhausted, and so were we. And because we were having to now walk our other 2 dogs in the weather elements, because they couldn't get in the backyard. And it was comforting to wake up in the morning and see that little dog at peace again, curled up. And she would even get on the larger bed outside her crate, and she was just so exhausted. And she was becoming more used to us, and we were making progress. And so we were starting to come out of this chaos. And as we all know, coming out of chaos takes time. And I know many of you have gone through some major chaos, and it takes time. And it also requires other people entering into each other's chaos to help those individuals out of chaos. It takes us out of our comfort zone. It messes up our daily routine. It causes us worry and trouble sleeping, because you have all these things going through your mind about what to do next. And then you're reminding yourself to rest in Yahweh and be anxious for nothing, but through everything, through prayers and supplication, let your requests be made known to Yahweh. And so you try to calm yourself down and rest in him. And at the same time, knowing people all around the world are dealing with chaos big time. I mean, we already heard about Russia bombing the Ukraine. We already know that people are in traffic jams trying to get out of certain areas. We know their world has been turned upside down. And I couldn't help but believe that Yahweh orchestrated this simple scenario about this dog in chaos, just to show us today that was exactly what the people were facing when they came out of Egypt after the sin of the golden calf. They had broken the covenant. They had bitten the hand of Yahweh that was feeding them. They bit the very hand of the one that rescued them, just as like a stray mad dog. And they had broken the covenant. They were about to be wiped out, except Moses intercedes for them. They don't know the chaotic mess they were in. But praise Yah, we have Yahweh. And he is the only one we must trust and know that brings redemptive order out of our chaotic environments. He brings redemptive order. He tells us again not to worry for anything, but through prayers and supplications with thanksgiving, let our requests be known to him. Yahweh is the one that brings redemptive order. He is the one that brings redemptive order. The enemy uses the same script, but is actually the one that devises chaos around our lives. But it's Yahweh that is truly in control. And it's Yahweh that is bringing redemptive order pretty soon for eternity. So I'm going to share screen and get further into our lesson today that he placed on my heart. And, you know, he was preparing this several weeks back. A couple of these presentations, he just had me focus on them, and I wasn't really sure what I would ever do with them until this Torah portion. So let me hide these floating meeting controls and I'll get started. So understand also, I put this together this week in the midst of everything else going on, but praise Yah, I did have some of the work on those presentations already done because Yahweh knew that this week would be somewhat turned upside down for me and my household. So welcome everyone to this week's Torah portion, Vayakhel, and he gathered. I titled this Melchizedek Priestly Precision because that's what Yahusha HaMashiach is. He is so awesome. He is so precise. He is so omniscient. He is so amazing. And we are so blessed to have him in our lives. He is the one who ushers in redemptive order out of chaos. And he is the one that prevented the annihilation of Israel after the sin of the golden calf. I took this quote from the Torah portion from the 7th edition from Torah to the Tribes, when Matthew said, Yahweh creates order, we create disorder. Only when we follow precise measurements with complete obedience can we be a divine dwelling place and rise safely above storms in our life. And that is so true. Without our high priest, Yahusha HaMashiach, we would be stuck in this chaotic fallen realm. We would be like the little dog out in the field, starving, hungry, not loved, no one showing us compassion. Only through him comes redemptive order. That is why he came. That is why he chose to lay down his life and take it back up again. That is what it took to restore redemptive order. Throughout our life, we ebb and flow between order and chaos. Whichever season we are in, whether an orderly season of shalom and peace, or a chaotic storm season, we abide in him and we can rest in him. He is strongest in our lives when we are at our weakest. Luke 12, starting with verse 35, let your loins be girded and your lamps burning. Right there, that connects our minds to the tabernacle and the priestly duties, and the menorah burning, and our loins girded with truth. Right there, right there. Let your loins be girded and your lamps burning, and be like men waiting for their master when he shall return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, shall find watching. Truly, I say to you that he shall gird himself and make them sit down to eat, and shall come and serve them. How amazing is that? And if he comes in the second watch or in the third watch and find them so, blessed are those servants. Hebrews 9:2-5. For a tent was prepared, the first part, in which was the lampstand and the table and the showbread, which is called the set apart place. And after the second veil, the part of the tent, which is called most set apart, to which belong the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that held the manna and the rod of Aaron that budded and the tablets of the covenant. And above it, the cherubim of esteem were overshadowing the place of atonement, about which we do not speak in detail. Have you ever pondered what that verse meant about which we do not now speak in detail? What I believe Yahweh wants us to grasp in this Torah portion is to know his awesomeness in everything he has created and in everything he does. None of the Israelites could comprehend the precise and meticulous attention to details that would be required to have Yahweh's esteem enter the dwelling place of the tabernacle in the wilderness to restore redemptive order. No one other than those with the privilege to enter the Holy of Holies would know exactly what took place and what manifested during such services. Apparently, it was so awe-inspiring that it was not spoken of casually, if spoken of at all. However, the pillar of cloud and pillar of fire could be seen by all of them. So what was Yahweh doing? He was teaching the people the consequences to sin and the difficulty of implementing plan B, his permissive will, over plan A, his perfect will. In order to bring redemptive order out of the chaos they now were in, would require that every item, every numeric value, every utensil, every veil, every covering, every measurement would need to be precise. Yahweh has no difficulty with precision, but mankind would need assistance to restore order for physical and spiritual life, correct? Because they physically relied on him as well. He was the hand that fed them in the wilderness. In Exodus 35 of our Torah portion today, we read, and Moses said to the children of Israel, see, Yahweh has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and he has filled him with the spirit of Elohim in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all work, to make designs, to work in gold and in silver and in bronze and in cutting of stones for setting and in carving wood, and to work in all workmanship of design. And he has put in his heart the ability to teach in him and Aholiah, son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan. He has filled them with skill to do all work of the engraver and the designer and embroiderer in blue and in purple and scarlet material and in fine linen, and a weaver doing any work, and makers of designs. So Yahweh chose Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and Aholiah from the tribe of Dan. That is an interesting pairing because the tribe of Judah was the lead tribe that would be the first to depart from the camp. And the tribe of Dan was the lead tribe that led the last quadrant of tribes that brought up the rear guard of the people. So bringing redemptive order out of this serpentine chaos would have been much simpler under the Melchizedek priestly order. However, that covenant was broken. We know that. Now the journey would be much more difficult under the book of the law. It would be very labor intensive. It would bring blessings if obeyed and curses if disobeyed, and possibly even death. It would serve as a temporary prosthetic. It was like they were going into marriage counseling after adultery, and they would be under the book of the law until, like we shared last Shabbat, until Yahusha could usher in redemptive precision once and for all. Frankly, they had created a mess. If Moses had not interceded, they would have been destitute. They possibly could have all been dead. Yahweh was wanting to start over with Moses, but Yahweh in his infinite wisdom had mercy, and it's his infinite wisdom that we should obey. How many in our day have conquered the 26 different types of mathematics around us? Or maybe the 24 different types of physics? Or maybe some of you are proficient in calculus or the measurements and impacts of frequency. You know, Job had a taste of Yahweh's incomprehensible awesomeness when Yahweh stated, Job, have you given the horse strength? Have you covered his neck with a mane? Would you make him leap like a locust? His splendid snorting is frightening. He paws in the valley and rejoices in strength. He gallops into the clash of arms. He laughs at fear and is not frightened, nor does he turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, the glittering spear and lance. He eats up the ground with fierceness and rage, and he does not stand still because of a voice of a shofar. At the blast of the shofar, he says, aha! And from afar, he smells the battle, the thunder of commanders and shouting. Or Job, do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Or do you observe when the deer gives birth? Do you number the months they complete? Or do you know the time when they bear young? They bow down, they bring forth their young, their labor pains are ended, their young ones are thriving, they grow up in the field, they shall leave and shall not return to them. Job, would you draw out Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Would you put a cord around his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Would he keep on pleading with you? Would he speak softly to you? Would he make a covenant with you to be taken as a servant forever? Would you play with him as with a bird? Or leash him for your young girls? Would trading partners bargain over him? Would they divide him among the merchants, fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Put your hand on him. Think of the struggle. Do not do it again. See, any expectation of him is disappointed. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so foolhardy to wake him up. Who then is able to stand against me? Job's confession and repentance. I, Job, answered Yahweh and said, you know that you are able to do all, and that no purpose is withheld from you. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I declared, but I did not understand. Matters too marvelous for me, which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. I ask you, then would you make it known to me? I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So throughout the last 5 chapters of Exodus, I'm just going to hit the highlights. It goes into the Sabbath regulations, but there are other parameters added because if the Sabbath is violated, it could bring death. There are contributions that are made to build the tabernacle from the whole body of Israelites. And then we see the construction of the tabernacle and some of the precision, some of the numbers, 10 curtains woven of fine linen, and then the length of each curtain, 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain, 4 cubits. And nowadays they can't hardly even define and agree upon how long is a cubit. They don't know for sure. And those that have placed themselves under still the book of the law, they're trying to refabricate such a dwelling place. And he joined 5 curtains, one to another, and the other 5 curtains he joined one to another. Everything had a place, everything had an order, everything had a number. In verse 12 of Exodus 36, it talks about 50 loops he made on one curtain and 50 loops he made on the edge of the end curtain of the second set, and so forth. And he made 50 hooks of gold and joined the curtains to each other with the hooks, and the dwelling place became one. And that's the picture, right? Because we are one in him. And this whole process for us to visualize what this parable was all about, because this was a living 3-dimensional parable of the one new man, and Yahweh in his love and his mercy and his understanding of our limited understanding and knowledge. He was very patient with us. He built us a 3-dimensional parable. He put into Bezalel and Aholiab this information, downloaded this information so they could even do this work. And in Exodus 37, they have the making the ark, and they make the table of showbread, and they make the lampstand, which we discussed last week, and the altar of incense, and all of these things, again, precise measurements. Bezalel had to make the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits, and 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. And then he had to put the 4 rings on it to be able to pick it up. He had to make the poles. He had to overlay the poles with gold. And again, everything had these precise measurements. He had to make the 2 cherubim of beaten gold, one cherub at one end, the other at the other end. He had to make sure their wings spread out above and covered the lid of atonement with their wings, with their faces toward each other. Everything had to be precise. The faces of the cherubim were turned toward the lid of atonement. And in chapter 38, we see the making of the altar of burnt offering, the bronze basin, the making of the court, and the materials for the tabernacle, and all of these locations. And, the closer we draw to Yahweh, the more order we will have in our lives. And some that just know Yahweh through their faith in his son, Yahusha HaMashiach, who laid down his life for them and took it back up again. And they are saved by grace through faith. That's just the beginning of the journey. And as we know him more and more, as we get to learn what his desires are, when we discover we are Israel born from above, we are his kingdom of priests. And when we know these things about the parable through the tabernacle in the wilderness, then we know that we are his and we are one body in him. So these chapters go into more and more detail, and all that was gathered, all the gold prepared for the work, and all the work of the set apart place. And it was the gold of the wave offering came to be 29 talents and 730 shekels. according to the shekel of the set apart place, and the silver from the ones counted of the congregation. Because see, he was bringing us together, and all the individuals of the congregation contributed. They were part of this, just like we are all part of his one new man. And it goes into all these specific measurements and how much was gathered: 100 talents, 1,775 shekels, a becca, half a shekel for a head, according to the shekel of the set apart place, for everyone passing over to those counted from 20 years old and above, for 603,550 men. I mean, most of these numbers go straight over our heads, and we really don't grasp the deeper story of all these numbers, because every jot and tittle of his word has a meaning. Just because we can't comprehend it fully, he still gives us glimpses of what he is conveying in his word, and that his word is so much more. It's his living word. Last week, we went over the priestly garments, and it goes into much detail, and all the stones and everything on the breastplate, the head dressing, his name, Yahweh, engraved on the head of the high priest. All of these things had meaning and a way to commune with Yahweh. And we see this, and we know that the priestly garment correlated to the full armor of Yahweh in Ephesians 6. We also know the 144,000 are sealed in Revelation 7, and here in Revelation 14 we read, "And I looked and saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. Even that number, we cannot fully comprehend. Having his father's name written upon their foreheads. And some texts read, having his name and his father's name written upon their foreheads, or they're sealed. And I heard a voice out of the heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one was able to learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. They were those who were not defiled with women, for they are maidens. They are those following the Lamb wherever he leads them on. They were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to Elohim and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no falsehood, for they are blameless before the throne of Elohim. They had entered redemptive order. And Exodus closes with chapter 40 about the tabernacle being erected and the esteem of Yahweh filling the dwelling place. And we know that the tabernacle was erected in the second year after leaving Egypt, on the first day of the first month. And we know in the second month, they are about to break camp. That's why they had organized all the tribes into 4 quadrants of tribes, and they would head out according to Yahweh's word. Everything had an order. So the tabernacle is erected, and his esteem would fill the dwelling place and guide them from chaos to order if they would obey. And the cloud covered the tent of appointment, and the esteem of Yahweh filled the dwelling place. And Moses was not able to come into the tent of appointment because the cloud dwelt on it, and the esteem, his glory of Yahweh filled the dwelling place. And when the cloud was taken up from above the dwelling place, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of Yahweh was on the dwelling place by day, and fire was on it by night, before the eyes of all the house of Israel in all their journeys. And we will see today, when we go through these couple of presentations, that we are on the very edge of entering into a time period like none other, called the Great Tribulation. It's going to be the last attempt by Satan to cause as much chaos as he possibly can and destroy many. And I believe this Torah portion teaching today and the dreams people are having, they're preparing us for that time, that or that possibility where our world is turned upside down. We find ourselves in the wilderness and we are guided by him, and his esteem will burn over our dwelling. Those without him will come to his esteem to see what's going on. What do we do? What is the word from Yahweh? Because that's what took place at Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. His esteem, just like the esteem, the cloud burning over the tabernacle in the wilderness, his esteem burned over their heads. And I believe with my whole heart that will once again happen in the end of days. Because how else will the world know where to gather, where to learn how to have redemptive order in their life, and where will they go to be healed? So there's these times, I believe he's preparing us, most certainly, because we are one body in Messiah. Life is in the blood. We are the temple, which was conveyed to us through a living three-dimensional parable of the tabernacle in the wilderness and the temple system and its structure. And we see the maturing, don't we? It was like they came, when they were brought out of Egypt, they were almost like in an embryonic stage. And then the temple that was built under Solomon was more robust. It had 10 lampstands in it, and it was maturing and growing and leading to where we are today, to teach us how Israel, born from above, would exist and be. And we are many making up one body, and we function and dwell as the one new man with Yahusha HaMashiach as the head. And we must always recognize how we need each other's gifts within the body. We are the remnant, and none of us have it all figured out. There is power in unity when we walk according to his word and his truth. We spoke before, when we studied the book of Revelation, about chiastic structures, and the whole book of Revelation is written in a literary chiastic or mirroring structure. It's not a scary term. It's just a mirror effect, and it's called a chiasmus or a chiastic structure. For simplicity, we see in Galatians 2 verse 16 that it is written in a chiastic structure, bringing emphasis to the letter C, the middle part of the structure, that where it says, we have believed in Yahusha HaMashiach. So these chiastic structures, these literary devices, point us to some special treasures, if you will. So we see the chiastic imagery even in the drawing, or that may have been a sculpture, it may have been a piece of fabric, I'm not sure, but you see how it mirrors itself. It's duplicated. But in that one, it doesn't have really a specific center point. And some of the names of these chiastic structures vary, but I think the chiastic naming convention is all that we need to know for now. So Yahweh is revealing more and more to his people as they discover these awesome treasures within his word. He's given us certain individuals that help us contemplate these possibilities, because his word is living and it is sharper than any two-edged sword. So this was the chiastic structure of the book of Revelation. It mirrored each other. So the prologue mirrored the epilogue. It has several similarities. And here, chapter 2 and through 3:22 mirrored down here the seven angels, Whore of Babylon, New Jerusalem, and so forth. So it's a mirror effect. You have the seven seals here, the seven bowls here. You have the 144 being sealed, and then they're mentioned again in Revelation 14. You have the two witnesses, you have the two beasts, you have the woman clothed with the sun, and so forth, so on. So you see the mirror effect. And this one has the center point, and that is Revelation 12. The first part of the book of Revelation is mirrored in the last part of the book of Revelation. And we know that Yahusha is the first and the last. And I thought it was pretty interesting. Bezalel and Aholiab, they were the first and the last quadrants that would lead the Israelites from camp to camp. So the bottom line is he's telling us we are on our way back to his very presence in the Garden of Eden. He has torn down that partition of separation in Revelation 4:1. He has removed our sins as far as the east is from the west. There's nothing keeping us from his presence. We're not going to be before the great white throne judgment. No, he's going to judge us for what we did for his kingdom. Yes. But he no longer sees our sins. They've been removed. So the awesomeness of Yahweh's word is infinite and cannot be fully comprehended by our finite brains. Yet in Yahweh's love and compassion, he imparts glimpses of his very presence through his people, in which he imparts these various gifts. And William Struess, I just came across his website probably 8 days ago, and it's called the 13th enumeration.com. And one of his particular focuses is on the chapter 9 of Daniel, and he shows the numeric emphasis behind the text and how it tells their own story and actually paints us a picture by numbers. Because not all of us are gifted with mathematics or knowing the Hebrew language. I know Diane knows the Hebrew language very well, but I don't. Or knowing how to work with wood, precious metals, or precious stones, nor do all of us understand how to play the musical instruments or all the healing herbs or how to bake the finest bread. Yet we benefit from all these abilities because we are one body in him and function under one spirit, his Ruach HaKodesh. So today we will just see a glimpse of how Yahweh takes ordinary people and gives them extraordinary insights and revelation. So the goal today is really to see the awesomeness of the Elohim we serve, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Elohim of the living and not the dead. So even in this example that William Struess deciphered, if you will, in Daniel down here, Daniel 9:23 through 27, which are very powerful prophetic verses, you see the chiastic pattern, the 49 words before and after, and then 2 words emphasized in the very center. The same thing with Daniel 9, verse 16 through 22. 48 with an emphasis to pointing to some key words that the inspired hand was writing to us that would be revealed through people that have this gift. And it also validates in people's lives that have struggled with agnosticism and things like that, even wondering if there is a one true living Elohim. It's indisputable when you study his word and see all the detail. And again, here, Daniel 9, 8 through 14, 50 and 15, 50 and 50 words, and then 13 in the middle. Daniel 9, 1 through 7, 48 words and 48 words, and 13 words are focused on. And overall, from Daniel 9, 16 through 27, and they're all listed over here, 222 words, 18 words in the middle, 222 words at the end. So he brought out these patterns, and he's written a whole book on it. I'm just trying to show some of the things that Yahweh has his people coming to the table and sharing things that we were not aware of. And then he shows a diagram of how he actually broke down the Hebrew language and counted the words, and how he brings out the oath of sevens, 7 times 7. And that's what the 49 words and the 49 words pointed to, 7 sevens in the very center. So we're going to look at sessions by Dean Coombs explaining this redemptive type of chiastic structure, how Yahweh brings redemptive order, and how this covers actually his entire word from Genesis to Revelation. And I did this diagram because, you know, his gift is understanding the numbers, but not so much how he communicates that. And so as we begin, I want to let you know a little bit about Dean. He holds a theology degree, but he has had many struggles and challenges along the way with his faith and within his family. He has struggled with agnosticism in the past, and his children have struggled with some of that as well. And I believe they're going through a season of that right now, so we need to lift them up in prayer. But it was his study of Yahweh's word and the validation that Yahweh showed him through these numerical patterns and the pictures revealed through the correlating event of the past, present, and future. And he goes into explaining all that in this session. And it just made him stand in awe of how we serve an Elohim of infinite wisdom. And I do pray that Yahweh sets his family free from any agnostic attacks on his family from the enemy. So he does this presentation very down to earth. And that's why I have overlaid transcription from his videos, because sometimes he speaks rather quickly, and I wanted you to be able to read what he was saying as well. And I also inserted additional graphics to help us track with him along the way. This is just a man that has devoted his life to Yahweh, and he's sharing with us from his heart the past 30 years. 30 years he is devoted to this. So let's take a listen.
My name is Dean Coombs. It's September 11th, 2020. I have been writing hundreds of articles over the past 25 years. They have to do with things the Lord has shown me, usually to do with coded messages, but particularly mathematics of the Bible. It all began in 1991, on October 22nd, when the Lord began to download the understanding into the mystery of these things, particularly the mathematics of the Bible. People don't realize, but you have the Bible, but in the Bible you constantly have reference to numbers, lists, chronology. Well, it's a language. It's not just useless information. So about 8 to 10 hours every day for the last 29 years. The Lord has been revealing these things. I mean, what I'm going to say, by the way, this is going to be the first of a series of videos. It's not going to be polished or anything. I'm just going to speak from my heart and get the word out. And so, just to illustrate, these, excuse me, by the way, I no doubt will seem kind of strange to you at times because some of the things you'll hear or my style is not orthodox, so please forgive me. Today, this is this year's calendar, and for the last 29 years, I've been recording every day things the Lord, these are all calendars, Jewish calendars, been showing to me. I don't record them on the calendar per se. At one point in the early days, I usually recorded what happened that day because it was, wonderful. And after a while, it became kind of normal. Didn't bother recording it. Like there's a random one. Here's 1994, for instance, and I'd record what would happen that day. Right? Now you know what this says. In early days, like anybody who's kind of just beginning in something, some ideas were kind of far-fetched. But over the years, they got ironed out. Here we go back to 1992. And so it has been over the years, year after year. And I'm only showing this because so many people, they'll study the scriptures and the numbers and think they're an expert overnight. Right? Well, I studied this for nearly 100 hours. I should know what I'm talking about. Okay, well, I study about a week, every week, for the past 30 years. And so forth. Excuse me. Now, I did that just to make a point that I'm no novice at this. The Lord has made me an expert. And I have a bachelor's of theology, but today's standards, people would think, well, what's that? Well, after I got the Bachelor of Theology, I went into the Lord's School, and for 30 years, he has been downloading this, and he does it with signs and wonders following. And every day he reveals something was ordained for that day to be revealed. And usually at the end of the day, he would show me, after he showed me something, that how that particular day also was ordained that it would be revealed that day. And then there would be, as I've recorded in hundreds of articles over the years, sometimes too wordy, many, many signs and wonders would be following, simply because when the Lord reveals something, it's in the Bible, it's like opening a seal. It's unsealing something, it's revealing something. And whenever something is revealed for the first time, or recovered after hundreds or thousands of years having been forgotten, there is a manifestation in the natural realm. And so hurricanes, earthquakes, and so forth would occur. I know that sounds wild, but I have documented it by literally about 1,000 articles, each of them lengthy. So I'm not saying anything you can't go and research and find out for yourself and so forth. But this is just a quick background. At this point, you are either thinking I'm crazy, or you're saying prove it. All right, so that's fine. I am basically just delivering my soul. The mathematics, I eventually will probably put it out on academic website, and I won't tell them what I just said to you, though they might find out, of course, because they'll think I'm crazy too. But the math speaks for itself, and it can't be refuted. And so it is what it is. The Lord once said that to me. It is what it is. Don't fret it. Don't try to put me in a box, the Lord. Don't try to put the Lord in a box. Speaking of boxes, okay, so from here, let's just jump to, as I said, I'll be a little scatterbrained. The format I will begin with is, I'm going to do a series of videos, and I will begin with the meaning of what the Lord has shown me, because that's how people can most easily relate. I'll just show from the scriptures what the Lord is saying. I won't bring in the math. As soon as you bring in the math, most people shut you down. And then after I do that, I'll bring in the math and show you how the mathematics is saying the same thing as what I just said. So I'll explain the scriptures, and then I'll bring in the math and show you the math of the scriptures is saying the same thing. It's the second witness within the scriptures. At times, I will also be bringing in there's, as far as chronology in the Bible, there are several chronologies. There's the chronology in your standard Bible right here, right? Your Bible that most everybody uses. Well, everybody uses, as far as I know. And then there is, scholars would know, and you may know, that there's a Septuagint version. It's actually the one that was used by the early church, mostly. The Septuagint has some different numbers in the chronology of Genesis, and as we shall see, that and the Samaritan Pentateuch, as you can see by the name, the Samaritans had their own Pentateuch. Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible, and it in turn was twinned with a book called the Book of Jubilees, which in turn was also married with the Book of Enoch, quoted in Peter in the Bible, and Jude, and alluded to all over the place in the Bible, particularly the book of Revelation. Anyways, so those 3 witnesses, the Masoretic text is your Hebrew Bible, the Samaritan Pentateuch I just mentioned, along with the Book of Jubilees, which they are joined at the hip with, and Septuagint versions. All of them contain chronologies, and they all are using the same language. It's the same language. As a matter of fact, they in turn are combating the Babylonians in their Sumer tablets and different chronological lists, and the Egyptians and even the Hindus. They're also using pretty much the same language. The language was lost pretty much, or completely in some cases, over the last 2,000 years. The Lord is recovering it now. He's showing it to his servants. So, and this will be that. This is what was lost. I got a lot to say. I won't get bogged down into that right now. So it's today is. I hope you bear with me for that brief introduction. It was necessary as the first video. Today is September 11th, Elul 22nd, the year 2020. Okay, but all these calendars are at use in the Bible, and chiefly the 336 days in the year of the priests, the 360 calendar, often associated directly with prophecy, the 364 calendar, which is the Book of Enoch says, is the 360 calendar. It's just ignoring those extra 4 days, and your regular solar calendar, either seen as 365 days, such as the Egyptians had, or including the extra leap days as we now have in our Gregorian system, which was improvement on the Julian calendar system of 365.2425, I think it is, days in a year according to the Gregorian calendar. So all that's important because as you will see, all the chronology and the math of the Bible is simply, when you have a time frame, say from creation to the Exodus, it can be viewed as regular years. The Masoretic text of your Bible has 2,668 years from creation to the Exodus by Moses out of Egypt in 1446 BC. By the way, that's the established date. I obviously can't show, many people have alternative dates, but it's the vast majority now accept 1446 BC as the date of the Exodus. I mean, even most charts and stuff. They always use that now. It's become the traditional established one over the last 70 years. That's the calendar I will be using. I'm not making up my own because it works. Either way, 2,668 years exist no matter whatever date you start for the Exodus. Wouldn't make any difference. Your Bible gives that number. You add up Adam and Seth and Enosh and so forth down to Shem and Noah and Shem. And you add all those up, and eventually you come, after 26 names, you will come, according to the Masoretic text, your Hebrew Bible that you have in front of you, you will come to the Exodus, Moses being the 26th name, and you add them up, and it comes up to 2,668 years. Straightforward stuff to anybody's even looked at chronology even a little bit. No problem. But that number, you can look at two ways. You can say 2,668 years from creation to Moses at the Exodus in 1446 BC. Or you can say, was that 2,668 years on the priestly calendar or on the regular solar calendar? And it's this flip-flopping that over time, I believe is sovereignly ordained, because it was according to the length of the sun, the moon, the stars, and all this would constrict them into a certain way you had to keep track of time. Just like you can have a calendar today that has a whimsically different amount of days in a year. Eventually you have to iron it out with leap months or leap days or some system so that you keep in synchronization with the actual equinox of the sun and a regular solar year, right? Otherwise, you'd be harvesting in the winter time, and everything be thrown off. And so over time, what developed, I kind of have it here. This is something I put together a while ago to do something else, but I show how that, in effect, to simplify this, what happened is basically 23 years on the 23 regular solar years equals exactly 25 priestly years. That's not exact, it's an extra day. And these days, by the way, will be accumulated and taken account for in the chronologies of the Bible. But almost exact. And this almost exact was enough to notice a striking pattern. Namely, that 23 years, well, let me just do this. I apologize. I wasn't going to go into the math first, but kind of, I guess, necessary for the very first video. By the way, the chronology of the Bible, it's as complicated as that. It's a language. People are trying to find out when creation was, and they missed the boat. It was never about that. It was saying something. It was the language of redemption. Rubik cube, right? This is more akin to what the chronologies of the Bible are actually look like and do. They reform, reshape with precision. That's unbelievable. By the way, I'm not really good at puzzles. I don't even know how to put this thing together. I like illustrations. This is something I put together with my puzzle with my grandkids. There's a pig, right? Oink, oink. Cat, meow, meow. To the Lord and to his angels, when they teach us these things, their intelligence is so superior to ours. Really, it's taken 30 years to come to understand this. But to them, what I'm about to reveal is as simple as a puzzle like this. And we think we're so smart. We are really quite dumb. And I'm a very stupid man. But the Lord is a very good teacher. And so he told me how to do this puzzle, so to speak. But closer to this, except this is a vastly understatement. The math of the Bible is closer to a crystalline form that reshapes and forms, or like a fabric, where time and space shape and reshape and mold and into a temple, a crystal temple, because crystals, they create structures that multiply and reshape itself in self-similar ways, like a fractal or kaleidoscope. These illustrations are much more akin to what really is happening, but that's complex stuff. But this is really to probably many of the angels, who are vastly superior in intelligence. What I'm about to say to you is as simple as that little puzzle to them. Okay, so I'm going to reveal something that it is simple in some ways, but the consequences are dramatically wonderful. And by the way, it's when you study this enough, you start getting a sense of this organic. It's like a living thing it's describing. Anyway. Essentially, 23 solar years equals 25 priestly years of 336 days in a year. It's priestly. Actually, you look that up. I'm not going to get into that right now. It was part of the weekly cycles of the priests, mentioned in Chronicles, New Testament, in the birth of John the Baptist, and so forth. 23 times 3, which is 69, can be converted into 70. Why? Because 69 solar years, regular solar years, equals 70 years on the 360 calendar. In other words, 70 times 360 divided by 365.2421, 2422 rather, is 69 years. Okay. And then 23 times 13, and all these numbers too are important, 3, 13, equals 299, which is the same as 300, because 299 solar years is the same as 300 years on the Enoch calendar of 364 days. There's a little residue left over, and the exact number is 294, and which is 6 Jubilees. Book of Jubilees talks about that in reference to Enoch. But that's a side point for now. The 23 number, as far as the 23s are concerned, 299 equals 300. And this simple code of converting a number of years into another number of years using a different calendar, flipping calendars, is the simple math behind extraordinary patterns, hidden messages, things. When I say hidden, it's saying the same thing that the actual text is saying. It's just saying amen to what's already written. And what you're looking at are keys that are mind-bending and wonderful keys. All right? And we will look at them a little later. Now, with that little introduction, we are going to look at something. And this video has gotten a lot longer than I expected. But the very first video, I guess I had to lay a certain foundation. Now, the nature of what the Lord shows me is always connected to world events in the past, in the present, and in the future. I can't help that. It's like the Lord doesn't teach you something in a vacuum. He doesn't say, I want to teach you something really intellectually stimulating with no moral bearing and no real connection to real life. The Lord never does that, ever does that. It's always connected to real things. And so whenever the Lord shows me something, it will be connected to events that are concrete, that have are happening in the past, present, and to come. It's just the nature of it. I guess every last thing he's ever shown me will have that. The latest thing yesterday had to do with Donald Trump peace treaty to be signed this September 15th with that Arab nation, with Israel. And that was what I was hoping to get to today. And, well, this video will be longer than I thought. If you want, hang in there. I will now explain that. Okay. Just remember that the number we'll be using today is a simple one. The basic 23 equals 25 conversion number, okay? Won't worry about these ones today. The basic pattern of the outline of the scriptures works like this, as far as chronology is concerned. Things begin at the creation, right here, right? That line represents creation. We can put a date on it, 4114 BC. That's your basic standard chronological time frame. You start from the Exodus over here at 1446 BC, and you add it all up. There are 2,668 years between these two. 1656 to the flood, plus the remainder, which, rather than guessing, better just do that again. 2668 minus 1656. Yes, 1012. 1012. And so from the creation, these you can get out your own Bible and see for yourself. These numbers are right in there. I'm not coming up with my numbers here. And the 1656 is well established, you know. Okay, from creation to the flood is 1656. That's 72 times 23, right? 1656 is 72 times 23, and that will have a huge bearing on a lot of things. And then from the flood to the Exodus, and that's how the Old Testament is basically divided up. Creation to the flood to the Exodus, and then to Christ, is 1,012 days, which is divided by 23 is 44. Right? That's 44 times 23. That's 72 times 23. And eventually what you'll find out is what's happened is in the Masoretic text, your Hebrew Bible, time and all the events recorded have been divided up according to the number 23. All the covenants that are found in the Bible are separated by multiples of 23, and not just any 23, 23s that will expand to important time frames. Like 1656 is 23 times 72, which will expand to 72 times 25, which is 1800, which is 5 times 360, and a whole lot more. It was a Sar, according to the Babylonians, a period of 3,600. This would be half of that, and so forth and so on. I won't go off into that right now, but that's basically the picture. And as far as the other versions of the Bible, you have the Samaritan Pentateuch. They have, in the book of Jubilees, they will have 1656 to, instead of to the flood, it will be to Noah's death. And the Septuagint, it will have a 1656 instead of to Noah's death or the flood, it has it to Noah's birth, right? So you have the three major texts and chronologies known to us. The Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible that we use today, the Septuagint and the Samaritan Pentateuch, each are 1,656 years, or 72 times 23, from creation to the birth, and then Noah's flood, and to the death of Noah. And then Shem will also fit into that. It'll be 1150 from Shem's birth to the entering into the promised land, and so forth and so on, which is the number found in Daniel 8. But we can go on and on and on. By the way, that's where the 23s come from. Remember 2300 evenings and mornings of Daniel 8, and the 483 of Daniel's 70 weeks minus the 1 week, which is 483 is 21 times 23. And blessed is he who waits for and reaches until the 1335th day. Notice it says reaches or touches. This is a common understanding of the book of Jubilees. It means 335 just began, which means it's 334 full days plus a bit, with that last day emphasized, which 1334 is divisible by 23 by 58, I believe. So this throughout the scriptures, you'll find this number 23 appearing, such as the Apostle Paul knew about it. He'll mention something like when the ship was about to be destroyed in late AD 59, in Paul's shipwreck. The book of Acts records this. You'll notice he takes the time to tell you how many people are on board the ship and other things about the Gemini twins were leading the ship as far as the wooden image in front of the ship. All these things are there for a reason. He knew this stuff back then. It was soon after Paul, this understanding was lost. And so he mentions the number. 276 were on board that ship. And he emphasizes that either we're all going to be saved or no one's going to be saved on the ship. You can go read the story for yourself. Well, 276 is 12 times 23. And that's an important number because it represents the 12 tribes of Israel. It represents all Israel being saved. Because when 23 converts to 25, it's a redemption number. And also, it's divisible by 69, the other number, and so forth. These numbers are redemption numbers. 23 becomes 25 because 25 is 5 times 5, the number of grace multiplied. And so it's basically that's the language of redemption and atonement. Atonement is when things overlap like that. You'll see many of those in the Bible. It's one way to condense or contract or expand time. But the most familiar one is the 23, where it expands or contracts from 25 to 23, 23 to 25, forming the patterns they had in mind. The mystery of the book of Jubilees, by the way, a lot of chronologers who study that, they think it's a book of poor math. Well, it's because they haven't understood the 23s. It's just because certain numbers can mean the same thing, even though it looks like they have a different, 25 can be 23 or 69 can be 70. And it was taken for granted that you would have known that back then among the scholars whom this book apparently was written. Basically, the book of Jubilees was an overkill on this stuff. And became a work of confusion for most, and therefore never really endured beyond the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth. But it was still well known to those who studied the book of Enoch and so forth, and known to the apostles, and known in the New Testament. Okay, so here we are. All right. This number is an interesting number. 2,668 for many ways. By the way, also in the Bible, a day can be a year and a year can be a day. And that's a common understanding. And you see that in the book of Chronicles, where it tells you how long the temple of Solomon was being constructed. Well, if you do the math, it began on the 32nd day of the year, the second day of the second month of the year. I was trying to look at my little calendar thing there. Anyway, so on the second day of the second month of the year, it says in the year 1966 BC, 480 years after the Exodus, 1 Kings 6:1, it begins to tells you that it was completed on the 23rd of the 7th month and so forth. You do all your math. Well, you'll soon find out the reason why it was delayed in construction to the second day of the second month was because that works out at exactly 2,668 to the new year of the 7.5 years later, plus 23 more days to when they sent them all home, and on it goes. They were using the pattern of creation when they completed the temple. It's a mirroring of it. And the temple itself is a mirror of creation, as any scholar who studies this stuff can tell you. The things that will be new, you won't find, is the importance of the 23. This is a mystery that has been revealed now. It was hidden from the ages. There were some, such as in the Jewish Encyclopedia, were touching on it, but they never really understood it. They didn't notice these numbers were popping up with multiples of 23. But they didn't understand why, at least that I know of. But it appears to be chaotic into this 25, a perfect number because it's 5 times 5, and it creates these even numbers when added to each other. 25 times 4 is 100, and so forth. And it turns the serpent of the 23 into the rod of the 25. And this is the imagery I want to show you now. It's not just my analogy, it's actually the biblical analogy, and it's intended to mean exactly that. In the creation, and now we get to the good part. In the creation, you have the story, we're going to talk about the serpent. You have the story of the serpent. And the serpent tempts the woman with the tree. We all know the story. The woman says to the serpent, the Lord says you must not eat or touch it. Well, the Lord never said you can't touch it, but it's an interesting thing because the word in Hebrew touches, nagah. That's the first time that word's used. It will eventually be used in Daniel, the second to last verse of the book of Daniel, chapter 12, concerning the 1335. Blessed is he who waits for and nagah, reaches out and touches the 1335th day. The word means to reach out and touch, such as reach out and touch the fruit of the tree. It may seem weird, but there is a connection, because the number 1335 less the number is 1334. As I said, it's divisible by 23, but it is also 667 times 2. And we're going to see what we're working with here is actually the old familiar 666. Now in the Bible, I throw these things out. I may not be systematic. I apologize for that. Throughout the scriptures and all versions and contexts of Samaritan Pentateuch, Septuagint, Book of Jubilees, Book of Enoch, all of them, your Hebrew Bible, they all will have something in common. They are using the language of redemption. And it's done different ways. It's done with the 23s, yes, but it also has a more fundamental method. And for simplicity's purpose, it's basically, it combines a 7 and a 13. Whenever you see a 7 and number 7 and a number 13 combined, it represents imperfection and 13, and perfection combined in a type of redemption. The perfection of God will undo the curse of the 13. That is found throughout the scriptures. There are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of examples. There are thousands of examples. They're found throughout the Bible. I mean, right off the bat, you have 130 years that Adam lives before he gives birth to his next son. And it goes on and on and on. The whole structure of it, particularly in the Septuagint, is based upon this. 13 and its connections with the 7. The entire framework is based upon it. It's huge. But another way of expressing 13, less used, is the 666. It has a similar idea of curse, fallen man, and so forth. The additional 7 is hinting at, the 666 plus 1 is hinting at redemption. And because it's multiple of 23, it can be converted into another number. 1334, or let's go back to 667. Well, no, we'll go 1334 divided by 23 is 58. That means equals 23 times 58, which equals 1450. 58 times 25, because it converts to 25, is 1450. An even number, and a most astonishing number. Again, here's creation. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not quite good, but it'll work. And then there is from here to here, and then over here. There is this 1, 2, 3, 4 again. And what you're looking at is the basic outline of the Bible that the Lord showed me yesterday. It's just one of many patterns, but it's a pretty cool pattern. What it is the 2,668 is divided by 667 times 4, like this. 6, 6. I'm going to call it 666 for now, because you can more easily identify with that. 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. All right, so from creation to the Exodus, this is the Exodus here, right? 1446 BC is 666 plus 666 plus 666 plus 666 to the Exodus. Well, it's pretty precise. It's actually to 1450 to 1446 BC. Okay. In other words, 666 times 4 from creation to 1450 BC is 666 times 4. 667 times 4 from creation, we will arrive 4 years later on 1446 BC. And the reason for this 4-year gap between 666 times 4 and 667 times 4 of the 23s is because it's referencing Moses. The book of Jubilees, it brings it out more clearly. In the book of Revelation, you have the book of Revelation divides a 7-year period into 2 3.5-year periods. One had to do with Moses or Enoch or Elijah type figure who would perform miracles and signs and wonders for 3.5 years. And then you have the next 3.5 years of a woman going into the wilderness and so forth. Right? That's well known if you study your Bible, Revelation 11, 12, and so forth. It's piggybacking on Daniel 8, Daniel 12, 11, and so forth. And Daniel 9. Now, this period is clarified, though, in the book of Jubilees. The book of Jubilees tells you that there was a 3.5-year period. Well, it has at first sight, it looks like a 4-year period, but it actually, it's actually 3.5. It's a little complex. Moses was 80.5 years of age at the Exodus, when you look at the story carefully. So, what you have is 666 times 4 to the beginning of this 3.5-year period of Moses when, according to the book of Jubilees, Moses went into a wilderness after the wilderness of Midian. And according to the book of Revelation, it talks about another 3.5 years in which the woman who gives birth to the man-child, she goes into the wilderness for 3.5 years, just like Israel went into the wilderness for 40 years. Well, it's doing some complex stuff, but basically 3.5 years is synonymous with 40 years. And even that's not quite accurate. It's the birthing process of 7 days plus 33 to create a 40, well known according to the law in Deuteronomy and so forth. But I'm not going to get down that. I don't want to overcomplicate it. So now you'll notice that $660. Oh, yeah. Missing an important point. This begins with the serpent, right? Don't touch the tree, she said to the serpent. God said, don't touch the tree. Don't neglect the tree. Don't touch the tree. Then 666 times 4 years later, and this other number, you have another serpent, Moses. Moses at the burning bush, right? He has his rod. There's a burning bush. God says from the burning bush to Moses, Moses says, I can't do this. I can't deliver Israel from Egypt. And God says to Moses, what is this you have in your hand? A rod, cast it down. It comes a serpent, right? And then God says, pick up that rod by the tail. Didn't say pick it up by the head. Pick it up by the tail. Kind of a small serpent, but anyways. So he picks up the serpent by the tail, and it becomes a rod in his hand that he will walk with. And you'll notice he picks it up by the tail so that from henceforth the head of the serpent is biting the dust as he would walk, right? That's what's happening. Now this imagery, right, he takes it by the tail. From henceforth he has the serpent under his feet. Here's a little walking stick, all right? Conveniently called Jesus is Lord. All right, so here's your walking stick, pretending it's Moses' walking stick. And he says, throw down your rod. Comes the serpent, he runs from it because it's all wiry. It's like the 23s, it's like the chronology that doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason, you know? It's this, why all these meaningless time frames? And he runs from it. He says, reach out with your hand, naga, pick it up. Well, it's not the Hebrew word naga in this case, but pick it up, and it will become a staff in your hand again. Right? So he picks it up by the tail. Now the head is down by his feet, which is where the enemy is to be all the time. This is what Jesus said. He said to the woman in the garden after they fell. Well, he said to the serpent, rather, the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, right? And also dust shall be the serpent's food. But the seed of the woman, sorry, the seed of the serpent will have his head crushed. But he, meaning the fruit of the woman, that is the Messiah that would come through the offspring of Eve, he would, although he would have his heel crushed, meaning the cross, that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. Anyways, I kind of messed that up a bit, but you got the idea. All right, so here is how we ought to be. Serpent under our feet wherever we go, right? Every step we take, boom. And everywhere we go, we're supposed to be claiming for the Lord. Satan is under my feet. Satan is under my feet. The devil, the serpent, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. And that's where we're supposed to keep him. Because all the efforts of the devil to muck and mess up the waters and the revelations of God over the ages, and he tries to confuse it. He's the God of chaos. The Lord just has an amazing way of outwitting the devil and turning his wild, serpentine, chaotic structure back into something useful. In other words, all the The machinations and efforts of the enemy to destroy us is nothing but fuel for the fire. It's nothing but a way of God demonstrating how he can turn all its efforts back into a straight rod again through the redemption. He does it mathematically using the 23 and an overlapping process and some other things. But no doubt God just uses that math so that he can demonstrate to the enemy that I have everything under control, and to us that I have everything under control. Very humiliating for the devil, very encouraging for us. Now, okay, so let's go back here. Well, by the way, one last thing. It was well known that it was understood that Adam lived 930 years, 70 years less 1,000. It was understood that a day is a year, years is 1,000 years. Peter quoting the Psalms and so forth. That was a concept well known. It was also picked up in extra biblical literature. That 1,000 years was like a day. And God said to the serpent, the Lord said to Adam and Eve, that in the day you eat of this fruit, you shall die. And so a day is like 1,000 years. And so Adam was given 70 years less 1,000 before he died to fulfill what God said, that in the day, 1,000 years, you eat it, you shall die. So everybody in the Bible, from Adam to Noah, lived almost 1,000, but not quite, right? Interesting, guys. Methuselah, I'm getting sidetracked, 969. So, who died in the flood? But, okay, that's me getting a little bit sidetracked, because there's so many wonderful patterns I can branch off into. This is the outline. Here, you have 666 times 4 to the Exodus, from the serpent in the garden to the serpent in Moses' hand, which, by the way, he does it again before the two magicians named James and Jambres in Peter, I believe it is, in the New Testament, and or Jude. And so, so the Moses, remember the story, when he appears before Pharaoh, he throws down the rod, but as it says in the New Testament in extra biblical literature, and well, the Bible refers to it as well, that the magicians did the same thing, but it tells us there were two, and so they throw down their two rods, and they become serpents, and the Lord, what does he do? The Lord serpent through Moses, it turns into a serpent, and it's already with the serpent, been turned into a serpent, but it swallows up the two rods, made serpents, of the magicians. So now, those two magicians no longer have a rod. It's in the hand of Moses. When it turns back to a rod in Moses' hand, it now contains 3 in 1, doesn't it? 3 rods in 1. And the Lord is saying that he turns the work of the devil upside down and into his own purposes. You can't fight God. I mean, angels and powers and principalities make us look like children. Oh, absolutely. We are just really children. But these same beings, so smart they are, compared to the Lord, know nothing. Nothing. Because the Lord is infinite in understanding. And so the Lord has his way, and he just swallows it all up. And so this is the imagery we're dealing with, but we see it in the cross, portrayed wonderfully, because 666 times 4 to the 3.5 years of Moses, as I explained, converts into, 266 converts into 2,900, right? 23, so, or 72 plus 44 times 25 will convert into 2,900, right? This is how it converts. Which means the 1444 will add, as you will see, the difference is 232. You'll notice it's 230 plus 2, believe it or not. I won't even go there. It will convert into the year 4346 BC. In other words, 414 BC plus 232 is 4346 BC. Or another way of saying it is 1446 BC of the Exodus plus 2,900 years of the serpent turned into a rod of 2,900 years. Serpent is 2668. The rod, because it's the 23 converts to 25 of grace, converts to 2,900. Now we see a round, easy number to digest. It's the year 4346 BC. 2,900 is a nice round number. We like round numbers. And since there are 40 years in the wilderness and the Jubilees, when they entered into the Promised Land, Jubilee is 49 years. They went into the Jubilee, into the Promised Land in 1406 BC. We'll notice the difference now between when the Jubilees began, when they entered into the Promised Land in 1406 BC, from the redemptive date of the creation of 4346 BC is exactly 60 Jubilees. In other words, 60 times 49 is the distance between 4346 BC and 1406 BC. Or in other words, 2,940 years, which, as we mentioned earlier, that it's also the number it's associated with Enoch. According to the Book of Jubilees, he was 294 up in heaven, according to their traditions and many ancient traditions found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth. Okay, so it's a very important number, to say the least, especially to do with Enochian calendar. So this is just a simple illustration, and the whole thing actually will multiply 4,900 years, 70 generations of 70 years. That's the generation of 70 years according to the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Enoch, and others. It's not always that way. It can be 40 or 100 as well. But 70 Jubilees, the angels that fell, where Book of Enoch says, were bound up for 70 Jubilees. Well, that's 4,900 years. 70 times 70 is 4,900. You'll notice that 4,900 years from 4346 BC is 555. Nice, interesting number. 555, number of grace, AD. But it is also 667 times 7 from the first number. In other words, 4414 plus 667 times 4 is the Exodus. But 4414 BC plus 667 times 7 is 555 AD or 556 AD, which in turn is 4,900, or 70 times 7, back to the creation date of redemption. I know this seems like, what's he doing? If you were to stop, take out your calculator, and you'll soon see what I'm saying. It's doing something pretty weird here. And by the way, Hebraic thought, everything, including the math, is in mirror form. You particularly see it, say, in the dates of the Noah's flood. Everything is arranged, the whole story is arranged to create a mirroring effect. Half a year of destruction, half a year of recovery, and it's using mirrored image of the numeric. But that's common. Hebrew poetry loves mirroring thing, or New Testament scholars would call it chiasms, because it's shaped like the chi of the Greek language, because it goes back and forth like a mirror. Anyways, that's how they thought. And so I won't take time to prove it now, but all, including the Babylonians, understood the importance of 6 BC and 1 AD, or 1 BC, that's 0 point, as being the center of some kind of convergence of time. And to the Jews, it meant Messiah. To the Babylonians, not quite sure what it meant. But they both had the same concept in the same time. That's why the astrologers of Babylon, by the star, knew that a king had been born. They were expecting something too, even the astrologers of Babylon. But so were the Jews. And I won't try to prove that right now, but just follow me right now. I can prove it, unless if you have a few more hours. I don't think you want to listen to me for 3 more hours, so we would just move on. So, what we have is a mirror. Because you'll notice 1450 BC is 667, or is 1334, 667 times 2, straightened into a rod. In other words, 667 times 2 is converted to 1450. And what you have going on here is a mirroring effect. Over here you have the opposite, 1446 to 1450 AD, like a mirror, completes the rod of God in the middle. Here you have the first portion of history, the first third of history, as 666 times 4, 667 times 4. That's the serpentine, unrecognizable, wiry, doesn't make sense, chaotic serpent and dragon coming out of the chaos of the deep of the Genesis account. And then the Exodus just happens to be 667 converted into this 1450. And then you have this mirror, and then so at the end you have back to 4114 AD, the mirror of this. And you'll see that the entire creation is formatted like this. You begin with the creation of Genesis and that story. You end, in the middle you have the story of Christ, right? And then you end with the book of Revelation with the New Jerusalem, the new creation, right? You begin with old creation, Christ is in the center, and then the new creation of the book of Revelation of this new Eden that's described in the last couple of chapters of the book of Revelation. And you'll notice then from the 1450 BC to the 1450 AD, or inclusive, is 2900, which, as I said, converts to 2668. So what I'm trying to say here is this, and it's a wonderful thing. Three crosses. Let's just say there's a cross right here. Three crosses, right? Jesus' cross. Okay. Okay. Three crosses. Jesus is the dividing of time between BC and AD like a mirror. You have a serpent of 666, 667 times 4. Right? And then you have the 666 times 4 that's been changed into a rod from the Exodus to the mirror of the Exodus, which represents Moses, who in turn represents Christ. And then you have the turning back into a serpent again for the last segment of time, which in some sense is still in our future. Okay. And so what was being described here is when Jesus died, the Bible says he was crucified between two thieves. Jesus, in the Hebrew language, to be upright is to be straight. The word means to be straight. The cross. Jesus is the upright one. He is the one straightened. Wow, it's tempting to go off into the direction of Jacob, whose name means deceiver, twisted one, whose name was changed into Israel, the upright one, right? Who struggled after the heel, grabbed the heel of his brother. All this language is, as they were being born, is hearkening back to the Genesis account of the crushing the head of the serpent, the heel, and all this stuff. It's all a retelling of the story. But anyways, so you have Jesus in the middle. He's the upright one. He's the 2900 divided in the center. 1400 plus 1400. 1400 BC of the Exodus to 1400 AD of the mirror of the Exodus. And then you have the 666 times 4 on either side. And these numbers, as I said, you have Jesus in the middle. He's the upright one. He's the 2900 divided in the center. 1400 plus 1400. 1400 BC of the Exodus to 1400 AD of the mirror of the Exodus. And then you have the 666 times 4 on either side. And these numbers, as I said, can be converted. What you're looking at is the picture of the cross. The Lord is hung on the cross between two serpents, so to speak, right? But he himself, what? It says, as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so the Son of Man will be lifted up in the wilderness. As the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man be lifted up on the cross, sorry. So the upright one becomes 666 times 4 for us. And the others flip out to become into a rod, the 2900 and 2900. And so what you have is this description of the rod thrown down becomes the serpent, Christ on the cross, which when he takes it by the tail becomes the rod again. It's describing the scene, and it's for a total of 4 plus 4 plus 4 times 666, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, 4 times 3, the 12 rods of Israel.
So the diagram he was painting for us through numbers were the chaos that began after Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent, or Nagash, and it created chaos, and how he restored redemptive order. And ultimately, that redemptive order was restored by his crucifixion on the tree, death, burial, and resurrection. And we are about to, once again, go through a time period of chaos like has never seen before. And some of us may be spared from that very hour. But bottom line, and not everything he shares and says, we may not all agree on all the things that he has brought forth, but overall, he's showing how Yahweh's word from Genesis to Revelation, with the numeric implications of taking chaotic numbers and transforming them into order. And if we should ever find ourselves out in the wilderness, you know, if we are not out of here, and if we are not spared from that hour, we must know that Yahweh is in full control. He is in full control. So if we are part of the woman out in the wilderness for 3.5 years, he's going to take care of us. We can rest in him, because the last 42 months will be Satan's last opportunity to do the evil he wants to do before he is consumed by Yahweh once and for all. So through these numbers, Dean was also showing the chiastic structure. Now, it may seem a little weird when he brought in the 1446 to 1450 AD. That's not necessarily like literal, but he was trying to show that the whole entire word is pointing us back to the chiastic Garden of Eden after Revelation, after he conquers Satan once and for all and creates a new heaven and earth. So he is just one other individual that is looking behind the numeric values of Yahweh's word and showing us some morsels of treasures, if you will. Ephesians 2:11 through 22, therefore remember that you, once nations in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah. We were in a chaotic state. And we walk by people every day in a chaotic state because they do not have Yahusha HaMashiach. He goes on to say that at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation. Nobody was going to come rescue us in that state. I could have ignored, me and my sister and Bruce could have ignored the starving dog across the waterway and just say, well, somebody else needs to take care of him. But no, Yah has gifted us and created us to take care of and be good stewards of his creation and to help the helpless, whether it's an animal, whether it's an infant, whatever the case. But without Yahusha, we were like a starving dog across the waterway that no one was willing to help. But praise Yah, he chose us too. He grafted us in, having no expectation, without Elohim in the world. Can you imagine being in this world without Elohim? But now in Messiah Yahusha, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. So our chaos has turned into the rod. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort us. For he is our peace. He is our shalom. He is our redemptive order, who has made both one, and having broken down the partition of the barrier where the cherubim were guarding the Garden of Eden from Adam and Eve re-entering and eating from the tree of life and existing in that chaotic state forever. No, he barred it from them. And through his death, burial, and resurrection, through his stripes, we are healed. The partition of separation has been broken down. The door, John the Revelator saw, having been opened in Revelation 4:1, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, the Torah of the commands and dogma, so as to create in himself one new man from the two, thus making peace, making shalom, and to completely restore to favor both of them unto Elohim in one body through the stake, having destroyed the enmity by it. And having come, he brought as good news peace to you who were far off, and peace to those near. You know, through that simple story of that starving dog, she was far off, and we brought peace to her because of what Yahweh has done for us. We are thankful, and we do for others, and we also do for all of his creation. We should bring peace to those around us. We should help them bring peace out of their chaotic lives, and to draw them closer to himself so that they too can have that shalom, that peace, and come out of her, my people, not only the traditional church settings and the man-made religions that are mixing truth and lies, to come out of that, but to come out of the world in general, because through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens of the set apart ones and members of the household of Elohim, having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yahusha Messiah himself being chief cornerstone, in whom all the building, whether it was the tabernacle in the wilderness whether it was Solomon's temple, whether it was the very beginning of creation that he originally designed, in whom all the building being joined together grows into a set apart dwelling place in Yahweh, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of Elohim in the spirit. So, hallelujah, we are being built together into the very dwelling place that we've been reading about in our Torah portion today. That was a 3D living parable to point us to the wonderful good news of the covenant confirming gospel message, where his Ruach HaKodesh dwells in us. His esteem will shine over us and through us. And we are the remnant on earth. And soon and very soon, after that last chaotic serpentine episode, we will be joined with all our brothers and sisters in him for eternity. So Shabbat Shalom. And I hope that brought the picture of what I felt like this Torah portion was trying to share with us.